Good evening and welcome. I'm Father Charleston, and on behalf of Church of the Redeemer, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Then and Now, celebrating the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. This evening is part of our annual series honoring Dr. King and Black History Month. Tonight would not be possible without the prayers and support of many members and friends of this parish and community. Thank you for making this evening possible. If you haven't come to hear the preacher preach, you can come back Sunday. But I want to tell you a quick story that will prove beyond any shadow of a doubt why celebrating the life and legacy of Dr. King remains incredibly important and relevant to our lives if we want to be builders of those communities of peace which Dr. King spoke so passionately about. My son Gus and I went to the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day in Pasadena. He's an Alabama fan, and that's okay. Anybody can be saved. After the game, I took him to dinner in Beverly Hills at Spago. That's called living beyond your means. At Wolfgang Puck's famous restaurant. And I was in the restaurant and wine business before ordained ministry. The restaurant's just reopened after a renovation. Dinner was great, get the duck. The main wall of the dining room now features a series of black and white photographs depicting a variety of historic events. In the center of the dining room, the largest photograph with a big spotlight on it is a copy of Spider Martin's famous picture of Dr. King, Andrew Young, and Ralph David Abernathy standing in front of the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma at the beginning of the second Selma to Montgomery March. I got the feeling that night that my friends who were all millennials working in the restaurant might not have a clue what that photograph was about. And so I told my son, I said, watch this. I complimented the waiter on the renovation, and I said, what's the deal with that big photograph in the center? He looked over his shoulder and he said, oh, I think that's from Wolfgang's childhood village in Austria. I said, wow, okay. Then the manager came over to thank us and check on us after dinner, and I asked him, I said, do you know the story maybe behind that picture? The manager grew up in Arizona and even had a girlfriend in Atlanta. He told me, I'm not real sure, but I know Chef Wolfgang loves to take pictures of bridges. This is a true story. I told you I wasn't going to preach, but can you see why it is important to keep the life and legacy of Dr. King alive today? To have Secretary Herman and Judge Hatchett here tonight is an incredible honor. I've long followed my fellow Alabamian, the Honorable Alexis Herman, and it's my joy to finally meet her. I was thrilled to see your name, Madam Secretary, added to the Alabama Business Hall of Fame in 2022. For those who are not in the know, the only higher honor in the state of Alabama is to be Nick Saban. Judge Hatchett, Your Honor, I need to confess to you and to members of the jury that I like courtroom TV so much that I skipped school in college more than once to watch you. Thank you. And when the school asked me to leave, I even tried blaming you to no avail. You're an incredible witness you're an incredible lady in the courtroom. You're firm but compassionate. Both of our guests tonight have chosen lives of service over self. Dr. Willie Clemens will introduce our honored guests tonight. If you don't know Dr. Clemens and his wife, Lateria, you should. With over 50 years as an educator and public servant, he has been a senior advisor to the president of Clark University, associate vice president and director of external affairs at Morehouse School of Medicine. He has been a college professor at Tuskegee University and the College of DuPage. He's raised millions of dollars for scholarships and mentoring programs and academic centers. He even has a new book out that I commend to you. But my favorite fact about Dr. Clemens is that he is a member of this parish church. And Willie will introduce our guests after I pray these words. Let us pray for our country tonight. Almighty God, who has given us this good nation for our heritage, we humbly beseech thee that we may always prove ourselves a people mindful of thy favor and glad to do thy will. Bless our land with honorable industry, sound learning, and pure manners. Save us from violence, discord, and confusion, from pride and arrogance, and from every evil way. Defend our liberties and fashion into one united people the multitudes brought hither out of many kindreds and tongues. Endue with the spirit of wisdom those to whom in thy name we entrust the authority of government, that there may be justice and peace at home, and that through obedience to thy law we may show forth thy praise among the nations of the earth. In the time of prosperity, Lord, fill our hearts with thankfulness, and in the day of trouble, suffer not our trust in thee to fail. All of which we ask through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Dr. Clemens.
Good evening. It is certainly a pleasure and an honor for me to be here this evening and to serve as chair for the celebration of life for Dr. Martin Luther King. The year 2018 was known as the year of the woman. Women, especially African-American women, from around the world made strides, outstanding contributions, and priceless achievements in their professions. They set standards, raising the bar, and in many instances, outpacing their male counterparts in many of their endeavors. Long before 2018, there were two women whose list of achievements set the pace and standards for others yet to come. They're known as women of first. And here to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King are the Honorable Alexis M. Herman and the Honorable Glenda Hatchett. This event is designed to continue the teachings and principles of Dr. King while engaging with others and maintaining a beloved community that is a significant part of his dream and legacy. Here at the Church of the Redeemer, we decided to celebrate Dr. King during Black History Month. As chair, along with other individuals of support, it is our desire to create a series of events that will bring the community together to share in conversation and dialogues with persons of note who were intimately involved with Dr. King or actively participated with the King family in keeping the vision of Dr. King alive. On two occasions, we had Ambassador Andrew Young, and in 2022, he was accompanied by world-renowned spiritual leader and performer Wintley Phipps. And so tonight, we are just again so honored to have Secretary Herman and Judge Hatchett, accompanied by Redeemer's own Lorraine Murphy and Sam Nelson as guests, as we pay homage to Dr. King. Well, we have engaged a wide range of organizations and leaders to partner with us in this endeavor, such as ASALA, NAACP, the Divine Nine Sororities and Fraternities, Gamma Psi Boule, the AKAs, the Links, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, and many others. We have also included the local and social media, including TV, Facebook, and Instagram. Secretary and Judge Hatchett will have a series of interviews with the press, visit students at Booker High School, meet with community leaders, and enjoy the amenities in a place we call paradise, while focusing and engaging, consistently maintaining his dream of a beloved community. And I want to thank those of you who have played a role in making this celebration happen. They are my beautiful wife and partner of 54 years, Lateria Seals Clemens, and our amazing daughters, Libra and Leolie Clemens, Dr. Nancy Boxell and spouse Dennis Thompson, who is unable to be with us this evening, but advised, counseled, and made themselves available as needed. And again, I want to thank Father Wilson and the Church of the Redeemer, especially Greer Ferguson and Debbie Fender, on your ongoing support and commitment to honor a national treasure, Dr. I put him on one.
Here we go. I'll do it.
Okay.
Sorry about that. These things happen. But
You can see our priest is very flexible and arises to all occasions.
Okay. I'm not stealing your money. I'm just
Okay, thank you. But again, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming and your ongoing support. And we also want you to join us too here on Sundays and get involved with many of the initiatives that exist at this church. But now it's time to hear from those two women of first. First, you will hear from Secretary Alexis Herman, a native Mobilian. My homegirl, as we say at that, because we all grew up in the same community. After graduating from Xavier University in New Orleans, she accepted a job with Catholic Charities, which led efforts to place the first women of color into professional and technical positions in major corporations, including General Motors, Delta Airlines, and the Coca-Cola Company. At the age of 29, President Jimmy Carter appointed her as director of the Women's Bureau, thus becoming the youngest director in the history of the Labor Department. In 1992, she became the first African-American woman to serve as the assistant to the president and the director of the White House Office of Public Liaison in the Clinton administration. And on May 1st, 1997, Alexis Herman was sworn in as America's 23rd Secretary of Labor and the first African American to lead the United States Department of Labor. As secretary, she was instrumental in raising the bar. Employment in this country reached a 30-year low and witnessed the safest workplace in the history of the Department of Labor. Alexis's father, Alex Herman, served as the first African-American elected official in the Deep South in 1940. Her mother, Gloria, was a master teacher in the Mobile public schools. In fact, she was my wife, Lateria's third grade teacher and the godmother of our youngest daughter, Laylee. They instilled in her a belief of being a public servant and helping those in need. Currently, she serves as chair and CEO of New Ventures, a risk management firm. She's a recipient of numerous awards and honors, receiving more than 30 honorary doctorate degrees from major colleges and universities. She was the first African-American woman to be inducted into Alabama Halls of Fame in 2022. She sits on several corporate boards, the Coca-Cola Company, MGM Resorts International, Toyota Motor Company, Entergy, and recently Cummins. She has served 5 presidents of the United States, both Democratic and Republican. She is a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. And sits on their executive board. She's also president of the Dorothy Irene Height Education Foundation. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Honorable Alexis M. Herman.
I was looking for you. Well, we don't have any glasses, darling, so we're going to really wing it tonight. Good evening. Good evening. And my thanks to you, Willie, my homeboy, for your warm, generous, and gracious introduction. You know, my daddy would have appreciated everything you just said about me. But my mama, bless her heart, she really would have believed you. But I'm so glad to be here, back in Sarasota, to be with you and my sister, your dear wife, Lateria. I thank you for your friendship, for your support, literally throughout the years. And both of you know there's nothing that I would not do that you would ask me to do. And so when you invited me especially to join you this evening in your parish, in your home church, Father Wilson, I want you to know I did not hesitate to say yes. And I thank you, Father. I thank you for not simply opening the doors, but I thank you for staying with this intent of continuing to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a part of Black History Month here. And you really have made it a special night for me because I get to do this with someone that I have loved and admired for many years, and that is my dear friend, Judge Glenda Hatchett. Yes, it's my honor. And you know, Willie, when I know that you have made it possible for all of these people to be here tonight because of your hard work. And I've said this to you privately, but I want to say it tonight publicly. I was so proud to read your book, This is my story. This is my song. And my friends, if you haven't gotten a copy of it, do so. Because it's about our history. And it especially, I believe, it speaks to our children. So thank you and congratulations. You know, coming here and leaving 30-degree weather in McLean, Virginia, it really was not hard. It really was not. And as I look into this audience tonight, I see so many friends, really extended family, that I dare not start calling the roll. I see my Delta Soros, thank you so much, my sisters in red, and I'm sure, Glenda, there are a few here in pink and green tonight, but the red really does stand out. My college roommate, my dearest friend, Joyce Carter, who was just named, by the way, by Xavier University, our alma mater, Alumna of the Year. And so congratulations, Joyce. She's from Chicago, and she flew all the way in to be with us. Gloria, I'm not going to get started on us, but I'm so glad to see your smiling face. And I think that's Patty sitting next to you. Is that Patty? Indeed it is. Libra, I'm going to have something to say about you a little bit later. But there are 3 people here tonight, really, that I do have to ask that they stand briefly and be recognized because they were my neighbors. And you all brought them here to Sarasota. I miss them so much, but they are here tonight. And so the Levies, David, Micah, I saw you come in. Mariama, thank you so much for being here tonight. I do miss you. I do miss you terribly. I do miss you. And I know somewhere there are a lot of my Coca-Cola team members here, so thank you so much for being here. You know, my friends, the reality is, in 2024, we are celebrating the 95th birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I'm going to speak more now from my heart tonight. Because if you noticed, everybody was passing me glasses. I forgot mine. Glenda had some beautiful pink ones. They don't work, sweetheart.
That's because they're 3 pair for $9.99.
And whoever gave me these, they somewhat work, and I'll try them for a little while. But let me just say that as we celebrate the 95th birthday of Martin Luther King Jr., you know, his life, his legacy, and the lessons that he left us are indeed timeless. This nation has a holiday named for just 3 people. 2 were presidents, George Washington, who helped to create our nation, Abraham Lincoln, who did the work to preserve our nation, and Martin Luther King Jr., who dedicated his entire life to helping this nation to redeem, literally, its moral purpose. He didn't live long enough to see a man walk on the moon, the creation of the internet. He didn't have a Facebook page. He didn't get to text or tweet. Ralph, he didn't read 50 emails a day, okay? And he didn't live long enough to see his only grandchild, Yolanda, Martin's baby girl. But he did have a sense that somehow advancing technology in this country was bringing us closer together as a world. And he spoke especially, as Willie said in his latter days, about the work that we needed to do to create the beloved community. And he talked about what did that mean. And for him, it simply meant that we had to come together as a nation, as a world community, as a global citizenry, to put aside our differences and to learn to work and to come together. You know, I was born in Mobile, Alabama, right, Father? But I always call myself a born-again Georgian. I speak to the former First Lady of Clark University. The reality is, those years in Atlanta, Georgia, for me were some of the best. And I had the opportunity to spend many hours with members of the King family, especially Mrs. King and Daddy King. I was actually in Ebenezer Baptist Church when Daddy King gave his last sermon. And that sermon was entitled, A Misplaced Emphasis. I remember it to this day. He said, you know, some of us go through this world watching what's happening. Others go through this world wondering what's happening. But far too many of us go through this world talking about what's happening. When in reality, what we have to do, we have to make Dr. King's dream still happen. He said, so many people ask me, and he said this with tears in his eyes, you know, how do I want to remember my boy? He said, people will say to me, do you want to remember him as the recipient of Nobel Peace Prize? Do you want to remember him as a young man who went to Morehouse College at the age of 15? Do you want to remember him as an ordained minister at the age of 18? Do you want to remember him as the leader of the Montgomery bus boycott? He said, you know, and Martin himself said, I want to be remembered as a drum major for justice. And that's what I want on my tombstone. And of course, that is what they put on it. He said, but I'm going to tell you how I want to remember my boy. I want to remember my boy as an A student. Give me your watch, really, because I'm not following a script here. He said, I want to remember my boy as an A student. He said, and not in the academic sense, although he was an A student. He said, I call him an A student because, first of all, he was aware. He was aware of the issue of the day and the issues of his time. He said he was an advocate. He was an advocate. You did not have to wonder what Martin Luther King Jr. stood for when he walked in a room. Everybody knew where he was coming from. He said, and he was a man of action. He acted on his beliefs. He acted on his principles. And so when Willie called me and he said, you know, will you come? Will you talk about, you know, your experience, your thoughts on the life and legacy of Dr. King? I thought about those 3 A's: awareness, advocacy, and action. He told me about the good work going on here in Sarasota, in this community, with this church, and what you're doing with the House of Resurrection. Is it resurrection?
Resurrection.
Yeah, it is resurrection. He talked to me about what you're doing for your day of hope with the public school system and our children. And you know, when he talked about your work with the homeless, and I thought about this notion of awareness right here in Sarasota, I thought to myself, you know, then and now, what was it like then when we talk about the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr.? And what is it like now? You know, in this country today, I believe we really take for granted the plight of the homeless. it has become such a part of the fabric of this nation, not just in Sarasota, but throughout the country. We take for granted. You know, when I was growing up in Mobile, and Terry, you know this, we had people we called bag men and bag ladies, but you didn't really see many of them. But today, you can't even count the number of people who are homeless on the street. And so I thank you, Father. I thank you, Father Wilson, for what you're doing. And I know that you're leading that organization. But you know, I ask you here, do you know how deep the problem is in Sarasota? Is it growing? Is it under control? You know, what is your awareness of just that one issue? I see my sisters in red, and Willie talked about the links and all of the great organizations who are here tonight. You know, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you just to come up with one imperative as a coalition of organizations to come together and maybe do just one thing to support the House of Resurrection and the work of the homeless. You talk about the life and legacy of Martin Luther King. He believed in coalitions. That's how he got his work done. And I think we would be so much better if we came together in a coalition of family organizations right here in Sarasota and just made a decision to do just one thing for the plight of the homeless. And as I heard Willie talk to me about the day of hope, where you go into the public schools and you give books, you give food, you even do hairstyles and haircuts, and you spend time with these children with spiritual enrichment. That is so very important today. I could spend all of my time right now just talking about the plight of education and what has happened with our children. What has happened with our children. We are losing, literally, a generation of our young people. We don't need just a day of hope. We need months of hopes. We need years of hope if we're going to really make the right investments that we have to make in our children and their education today. That's why I'm so proud of you, Micah, and I'm glad you're here. I could say more about, what's your high school here in Sarasota? Say it louder. Out of Door Academy. That's right. It's a great school here, and he's a great student. But he's one of the great leaders and mentors right here in this community, a young person. And I thank you for that. I thank you for that. I spoke just on Monday at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And I was struck by the data in a national poll. 70% of our children, college students today, don't believe that they have the same chance to achieve the American dream as their parents did. 62% of college students today think that the problems here at home domestically are much greater than the problems internationally. And 63% are worried today about mass shootings in their schools. You talk about then and now, the life and times and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. We didn't even have the concept of mass school shootings. We didn't even talk about that. It's a very different world today. It's a very different world. And Libra, I'm going to embarrass you a little bit because you know your nanny doesn't rap. I don't rap, but I know a few rap songs. And I'm going to see if you do. Because there's one by Black Sheep that says you can get with this. Well, you know, y'all know it too, don't you? All right, Father, you know that one? Yeah, it says you can get with this or you can get with that. So I say to you, you can get with this and make the investments and become more aware of what we've got to do to support our children today. Or you can get with that. Meaning you can look back and think somebody else is going to handle it because it's their problem. You see, the choice, my friends, tonight, it really is yours. It really is yours. And I'm going to start winding down because I think I had some other things to say, but since I can't see it, I'm going to tell you a story instead. I'm going to tell you a story about a homeboy and a homegirl from Mobile, Alabama. Their names were Lamont and Thelma Godwin. Willie, you knew them well. Well, they had moved to Washington, D.C., and we were all working there, and we were neighbors in Southwest Washington. And one day, their little boy, Charlie, who also happens to be my godson, he was 5 years old, and he came running in. We were sitting on the back porch. We had a little screened-in door area. And he runs up to his mother, Thelma, and he said, Mama, Mama, where do I come from? Where do I come from? And Thelma got all frustrated. She said, oh, Lord, I didn't think I'd have to get into all of this right now. So she brings Glenda Charlie up on her lap. And she said, well, Charlie, let me tell you. When your daddy and I met, well, we fell in love. And you see, Charlie, when grown people fall in love, well, they are. You see, they are. And Charlie looked at his mom and he said, oh, Mama, I already know about all of that. Billy just told me he came from Tennessee. Now, where do I come from? To which his mama happily said, Mobile, Alabama. So, like Charlie tonight, let us not jump to conclusions and think that we know all that stuff, that we know about all the issues. But do what Dr. King did. Do your homework. Investigate what has to be done right here to make a difference in Sarasota. And like Thelma, Charlie's mama, let us not jump to conclusions, but let us take the real time of what we have to do to listen to one another, to hear one another. If there's one thing that probably troubles me more than anything else today, it is really this notion, this sense that we don't see one another. We don't listen to one another. We don't really know what it means to create that beloved community that Dr. King spoke of. We don't understand or talk about anymore the common good, the recognition that the better some of us do, the better all of us do, Because we're so busy investing in what we want to do.
Say that.
And what we want to do.
Say that.
It used to be back then, not just about me, but it really was about us
Say that.
as a community, as an extended family. And so I challenge you tonight to think about what is the difference you can make. You know, Martin Luther King Jr. was 39 years old when he died. But he had lived a life full of passion and purpose. One of my great mentors and my surrogate mom was Dr. Dorothy Irene Height. She was the longest serving president of the National Council of Negro Women, an organization founded by a great Floridian, Mary McLeod Bethune. But Dr. Height, who actually met a young Martin at the age of 15, told me one day as we were sitting in her living room, she said, Alexis, do you know what? Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech twice before. She said, the last time he gave it, I was there. It was at a church in Detroit, Michigan. She said, but do you know what the difference was when he gave that speech at the mall in Washington, D.C.? She said the difference was that day, the world was watching and listening. That's what the difference was. And so I say to you tonight as I close, the world may not be watching and listening to what is going on here in Sarasota, Florida. But you are. You are. And so you need to ask yourselves the question, what is it I can do in my time and in my space to make a difference? The good book teaches us that to whom much is given, much is expected.
Absolutely.
And I love the words in Galatians, Father, where it says, and let us not grow weary in doing good. That is our calling. That is our challenge. And I thank you for what you have done. But more importantly, I thank you for what you're going to do to continue making the promise of America, the practice of America, and living the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. God bless you tonight.
Well, again, Secretary, you have risen to the occasion, and we're just so proud of you and all the things that you continuously to do, and thank you for coming and being here with us in Sarasota, Florida. And now, before we bring on the judge, as I had mentioned earlier, that there is a person here at Redeemer whose voice just resonates not only here at church, but all over the Sarasota community. And we are just so proud to have her be with us this evening, accompanied by Sam Nelson. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Lorraine Murphy. Well, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lorraine. Beautiful as usual. And now the next.
Just so they know, I need to go to choir first.
Well, that is true. Again, thank you. Judge Glenda A. Hatchett, a native of Atlanta, Georgia. Glenda comes on the second phase of our life. Alexis was at the beginning in Mobile, and then when we moved to Atlanta over 50 years ago, it was Glenda that we met, and she and Lateria bonded as chartered members of the Links chapter 45 years ago, and we've just been very, very, very close friends since. But she's a graduate of Mount Holyoke College and Emory University School of Law, where she was an Earl Warren Scholar. Judge Hatchett completed a prestigious federal clerkship in the United States District Court, the Northern District of Georgia, where she was the first Black clerk in that federal court. Judge Hatchett then spent nearly 10 years at Delta Airlines, where she was the airline's highest-ranking woman of color worldwide. As senior attorney, she represented Delta Airlines in labor personnel, antitrust litigation, and commercial acquisition. As a public relations manager, she supervised global crisis management and handled media relations for 50 U.S. cities in Europe and Asia. Ebony Magazine recognized her as one of the nation's most outstanding women in corporate America. Judge Hatchett was appointed a judgeship in 1991, becoming Georgia's first Black chief judge of a state court in the state's history. There she presided over Fulton County Juvenile Court, one of the largest juvenile court system in the nation. Judge Hatchett gained national recognition for her groundbreaking initiative for juvenile reform and received several awards, including the United States Justice Department Roscoe Pound Award, the department's highest award. She is a major advocate for children and family. She serves on 3 Fortune 500 companies board, HCA, The Gap, and Service Masters Company. She has worked tirelessly as a member of the National Football League Atlanta Falcons Board of Advisor and a consultant to the National Basketball Association on pressing legal and social issues. I think we all know that and what she is known for, in addition to her role as a judge dealing in the legal situation, she is a television personality. She presided over the 2-time Emmy-nominated national syndicated show, Judge Hatchett, now in its 23rd season. She returned. She recently returned to TV in her new television court series, The Verdict. Please watch. And she has done many things in that medium as well. She's an author. She's won any number of awards. She's received any number of honorary degrees. She's a public servant, and she has devoted her life to giving back and working, especially with youth. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, here comes the judge, Glenda Hatchett.
Thank you.
Judge Hatchett, before, and I know you have words to share, but growing up in Atlanta, share with them, the audience that is, your experience with the King family and how that has helped shape you and what you do today. So we could start with that.
Let me take 3 seconds to thank Willie and Materia for getting me here. And I absolutely have such deep respect for you, Alexis. We go so far back, and I want you to know that what you see is what you get, that she is fierce, powerful, and unapologetically a Black committed woman, and we have all benefited from you, and we have to stop and say thank you. I know so many people in the audience, but I have to point out my family member, Barbara Edlin, who is here, and love you, Barbara. There she is,
Barbara?
back there. Come on, Barbara, stand up. And so I grew up in Atlanta, and I am very quick to tell you that I am a beneficiary of Dr. Martin Luther King's dream. But as a child, I didn't get it. You know, he was just Yoki and Marty's daddy. You know, Bernice and Dexter were much younger, but I took music with Marty and Yoki, and our music teacher lived diagonally across the street from the Kings. And so he was just their daddy. I didn't understand as a child that he was this transformational figure that changed the world. I have to tell you, and I have used up my quota of curse words for the month, and it's still early, that I am outraged that a Clarence would say that everything's fine. It is not fine. And that we continue to have to fight the good fight. And so I'll show you how things come around. Bernice King, his youngest daughter, then went to law school and to theology school. People know her as a preacher, but forget that she also is a lawyer, having a dual degree from Emory University. When I went to the bench, she came to me even before I was sworn in and said, I want to come and be your law clerk. And she was my very, very first law clerk when I became a judge. And Mrs. King, bless her heart, was sitting there on the front row the day that I was sworn in. And so having grown up in Atlanta, you know, we see and we understand all of these historical figures that had made such a difference in our lives. The Joseph Lowrys, aside from Dr. King, in addition to that, there were all of these warriors that we saw. And lastly, I will tell you, Alexis and I hate to admit it, but I was ashamed to wear this coat because my parents would not cross the picket lines. And so my mother took this navy blue coat, Materia, and she cut off the sleeves and inserted a red insert. And then she did the same thing for the bottom because I had outgrown the coat. But we weren't going to buy a new coat because we weren't going to cross the picket lines. And my dad was very clear about that. And she made me a matching red tam, but I didn't want to wear it. And I wish I had that freedom coat now. Because what our parents did for us and what Dr. King taught us to understand is that the progress required sacrifice. It required sacrifice.
Good. Another question, Judge, is what do you see coming into your courtroom? What do you observe in terms of the breakdown in regards to values in your courtroom with our families and children? What values are missing?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, when I was growing up in Atlanta, and you had the same experiences in Mobile, and everybody in my age category can repeat this story, you couldn't get away with nothing, right? And thank God that Mr. Farmer had gone on to the glory, and they didn't interview him when they were checking me out to be a judge, because if he had told the stories about the stuff we used to do, and Miss Johnson lived across the street, and, you know, we used to call him as Hawkeye. Like, we didn't think she had anything better to do than to stand in that window and catch us doing stuff we had no business doing. And I say that to say that in my courtroom, there were so many young people that people didn't have their hands on them. You know what I mean? They didn't have their hands on them. And so it didn't matter who caught you doing stuff. You had to be accountable to everybody because you belong to everybody. Very quickly, when I was sworn in, I'd gone over to West End Mall, and this man, older gentleman, said, "You that new juvenile court judge downtown?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." You know, I was proud of that. He said, "Well, first of all, you look like a juvenile." And then he said, "But let me tell you something. The problem is nobody's calling these boys son anymore." Think about that. When you were growing up, really, it was like, "Son, how you doing? Son, it's awfully late out here. Son, you need to get on home. Son, I heard you were on your way to college. Son, I haven't seen your grandfather. Tell him I might not have known your name, but he called you son." And we as a community have got to get back into the business of calling our children our sons and daughters and meaning it. And so accountability, you don't want a judge like me to have to tell your child that they done messed up. Really, you need to set the rules. But Judge, if I did what you told me to do in your parenting book, my child wouldn't like me. I said, "Excuse me?" That's why she's got Benita and Jocelyn and Sarah and Bobo and all of them. Ray, all of them. But if God didn't need you to be the parent, he would have put them here grown. They would have come to the world grown. And so what I have seen, Willie, and I'll make this very quick, is that we don't have the fabric of that community that these children can stand on oftentimes. And accountability. And what are you saying? You're giving your daughter a curfew, but your son can't spell curfew. I'm going there. I am, and I can say this because I'm, have raised two sons. And if we are not doing that, then who are our daughters going to marry? If we aren't raising a new generation of responsible men and women, and until we get back there and have school systems, and I'm finished, school systems who are responsible and keeping our children engaged and in school, a child who drops out is 3.5 times more likely to have a criminal record than a child who graduates. 7 times more likely to be dependent on welfare, 7.5 times more likely to then have a child who will drop out. So who's on the school board? Who's in the classrooms? Who's running our public education? We got to ask the hard questions. And we got to hold elected officials accountable, because too many of them are drawing breath and salary, as my mama would say, and not doing enough. Because it's not just about who's being the president. It's also who is running day to day in our communities.
Thank you. And Judge, both you and Secretary Herman were first, as I mentioned in the introduction. Are you conscious of that pioneer status? Is it hard being a first or a pioneer? Are there lessons that you could share from your lived experiences?
I'll be blunt. Rector back there, I got my ass kicked a lot. You can't sugarcoat this. Right? You can't sugarcoat this. I go into a deposition and they couldn't imagine that a young Black woman could be defending Delta Airlines on a multi-million dollar antitrust suit, which if I'd lost, would have not doubled but tripled in damages. Quick story, 30 seconds. I walk in, well, I'm there already, and opposing counsel walks in, big conference room in New York, law firm up in New York, and he looks at me and he says, "We'll get started when your boss gets here." You know these, you've been there. So in that split second, I had to decide whether I was going to go Sinead on him or if I was going to proceed to win. Now, I'm not suggesting you let people roll over you, but sometimes you just gotta be very strategic. So fast forward, I say calmly, and I wouldn't do this now, Alexis, I promise you I wouldn't do it, but back in the day, it was survival. I signed all of my pleadings that I filed with the court, all of the letters, every correspondence went out as G. Hatchett Johnson. Well, Johnson's not in the picture no more, but back in the day, G. Hatchett Johnson. And so they just assumed I was a man. I wouldn't do that now. But then I had to do it to survive. I mean, I'm just being real. So it just never occurred to him that the woman would be doing it, and certainly a Black woman who was barely 30 years old. So then he says, laughs in my face, whips out a magazine out of his briefcase and rears back and starts reading the magazine. Okay, I'll make this real quick. So I did some softball questions. Then I proceeded to nail his client's ass to the wall. I won that case on preliminary motions. For lawyers in this audience, you know that's almost dang on impossible in an antitrust case. So my general counsel calls me in, congratulations, and then about 3 weeks later he says, "Glenda, they want to apologize." I said, "No, thank you. I don't need it. I'm done." And so I can tell you 100 stories, 100 stories where people were racist and tried to sabotage and undermine. And that didn't just happen in corporate America, that happened when I was on the bench. Every place I have been, it is always the struggle. But my role, Alexis's role, has always been to get that door open, force it wider, but very importantly, to reach back and pull up a new generation behind us.
Just briefly, Secretary Herman, can you respond to that as well as being the first?
Well, first of all, ditto everything that the judge has said. But just at a very human, emotional level, it's lonely.
It's very lonely.
It's lonely being the first because you can't talk to anybody else who understands where you're coming from.
It's very true.
You learn to wear the mask, to manage your own rage, as you know you're being discounted and ignored in the room when you speak.
Right.
And I think the other reality of when you talk about what it means to be a pioneer and opening those doors so that others can walk through, you really have to just keep that at the top of your mind.
You do.
That it's not about me, but
right.
this is about our people.
That's right.
We have to lift as we climb. And we stand on the shoulders of those who went before us. And now it's our turn. And so I have always had to find ways to encourage myself so that I don't become discouraged
Or bitter.
or bitter
Or bitter.
and angry.
And angry. And yep, and that too. Yeah, you have to do that.
And I'll just say this. We're in church. I didn't pray a lot when I was a young woman. But as I got older, and as I had to recognize this lonely walk, I learned to pray. I really learned to pray. Because sometimes it feels like it's just you and Jesus. And let me tell you.
And it is.
It is. That's all I say.
Thank you. And this is the last question. What would be the top 3 values that you embrace as a leader, Judge Hatchett, that have contributed to your own development?
I think authenticity. That you gotta be who you are, and unapologetically so. The second would be integrity. Your word has got to be your bond. It's got to be. And then I think the third is just pure tenacity. That you can't give up. Just gotta keep pushing as hard as you can.
Secretary?
Well, would you believe if you'd asked me first, I would have said the same thing?
Great.
I would just do a postscript on the word integrity. And a lot of people don't know what that means, really, especially today.
Say that.
But my grandmama used to say there's a soul line that you don't cross. And you've got to know when to say no and when to compromise. And when you have real integrity, you're very clear about your boundaries.
Very clear.
Very clear. And where you stand.
I love that.
So.
Maynard Jackson, if I could just add a little footnote to that, Alexis, I have been so blessed to be able to work for some incredible people. So my first year after law school, people who were already lawyers, because he only had one legal intern, Maynard Jackson, when he was mayor. Love that man. And I would get to sit in these meetings, and what he would say is that if you are close enough to the line in sports, that's the analogy he would use. If you're close enough to that outer bounds line to get your cleats with chalk on them, even if you didn't cross it, you're too close. I have never forgotten that. Mm-hmm. Never forgotten that.
Absolutely.
And I just want to do a post note because Laylee came in. Hi, Laylee. And as you were talking about that, I think the other value I would add is what you talked about. And that is the sense of the value of family. The value of family and the work that we have to do to keep the relationships and to stay connected. It is so much harder today, especially with our children and the impact of social media. You know, I was late, Willie was rushing me to get here. Because I was counseling a girlfriend in Washington who was crying because she had a grandbaby over the weekend. And he's 5 years old. He was in there watching cartoons. So, you know, she didn't pay any attention. These kids do all these games and, you know, we stick everything in front of them now. And so she stuck her head in. And here was a cartoon of porn. That this child was watching on television. And I'm not going to say it because we are in church, what he quoted to his grandmama to ask her, well, what did this mean? I'll tell you afterwards. But she just couldn't believe it. And so this whole idea today of how we keep our family and our connections and really pay attention more today of what's going on with our children.
Gotta relieve that fabric.
Yeah, it is so important.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our celebration of the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. And once again, I want to thank you for coming and being supportive of this. We have made this an annual celebration, thanks to Father Wilson and to the Church of the Redeemer. Father Ralph, I think, is here, and I think Father David and other members of the clergy. Father Michael is here. So we want to again thank you for coming, and certainly want to thank Alexis and Glenda, not only for coming, but our long-standing friendship and relationship. Father Wilson?
Thank you. I'm going up to the altar, and I'm going to say a prayer and give you all a blessing. Okay? Please stand and let's all pray. Grant, O God, that your holy and life-giving Spirit may so move every human heart, and especially the hearts and the people of this city, that the barriers which seem to divide us would crumble, suspicions would disappear, and hatreds cease. That our sad divisions being healed, we may truly live in justice and peace under the banner of the Prince of Peace, who is Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost be amongst you and remain with you always. Amen. Amen. God bless you and thank you.